see so many people. It's been a long time since I've seen so many people. Wow. It's gonna take a while to get used to. Today, we are striking all over the world, not the least here in Germany and Berlin, under the hashtag uproot the system, because that's what we want to do. It's been a really turbulent last year and a half. This has been a time where we have been reminded of how vulnerable we are. But we have also been reminded of how fast things can change and be turned completely upside down. In some parts of the world, we have experienced what it is like to truly treat an emergency like an emergency and to change social norms. But while all this has happened, of course the climate crisis hasn't disappeared. And we have not disappeared. The concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere hasn't been this high for at least 3 million years. And 2020 was tied with 2016, the hottest year ever recorded. And recently, we've seen extreme weather events rage all around the world, taking many lives, not the least here in Germany. And if there's one other thing that this pandemic has shown us, it is that the climate crisis has never once been treated like an emergency. It is clearer than ever that no political party is doing close to enough. But it's even worse than that. Not even their proposed commitments are close to being aligned with what would be needed to fulfill the Paris Agreement. As an example, if you look at the different parties' climate policies and compare that to the CO2 budgets provided by the IPCC that will keep us below 1.5 degrees, you can see that there's a huge gap. Not one party is even close to even proposing a pathway that will be consistent with the Paris Agreement. And yes, voting is essential, but alone it is not enough. If we want to ensure a safe present and future on planet Earth, we need to be active democratic citizens and go out on the streets like we are doing today. We need to become climate activists and demand real change. Because remember, change is now not only possible, it is also urgently necessary. But when enough people demand change, then change will come. On election day or any other day, and that's why we have to continue fighting for as long as it takes. The climate crisis is an accumulative crisis. The CO2 we emit now will be up in the atmosphere for up to a millennia. It is just as much about our present and future emissions as it is about our historic emissions. And that's why we need to have historic emissions in mind when we ensure climate justice. And while we're at it, Germany is the 4th biggest emitter of CO2 in history. For a nation of about 80 million people, that's quite an achievement. Germany is objectively one of the biggest climate villains. But we are not only stealing the future from our children and grandchildren, we are also stealing the present from the most affected people in the most affected areas. Those who are already suffering the consequences of the early stages of the climate and ecological crisis, and those who have contributed to this crisis the least. And now, as we move out of the pandemic, many are talking about using this as an opportunity for a green, sustainable recovery, whatever that means. And world leaders are talking about building back better, promising green investments and setting vague and distant climate targets in order to say that they are taking climate action. However, the fact that we are in a crisis that we cannot build, buy or invest our way out of seems to create some kind of collective mental short circuit among the people in power. And the longer they pretend that we can solve the climate crisis within today's system, the more invaluable time we will lose. But even if we ignore that fact, when you look at we are actually investing the money that's supposed to be building back better, it shows the hypocrisy of our leaders. It turns out that the green recovery they are talking about isn't so green after all. Only 2% of government's recovery spending has been allocated to clean energy, according to IEA. And 2021 is currently projected to experience the second highest emission rise ever. And according to a new report by the UN, the global emissions are expected to rise by 16% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels. Yes, you heard that right. Time and time again, the people in power show their true interest and priorities. And it is not an overstatement to say that they simply don't seem to give a damn about us. We can no longer leave this to the people in power to take care of. Yes, we must vote, you must vote. But remember that voting only will not be enough. We must keep going into the streets, and we must keep demanding our leaders to take real climate action. We must never give up. There's no going back now. But we can still turn this around. People are ready for change. We want change. We demand change. And we are the change. Thank you so much. Dankeschön.
Greta, auch an dich, dass du vor der Wahl nochmal gekommen bist und gezeigt hast, wie wichtig diese Wahl ist. Und das hat nicht nur Greta verstanden, das habt ihr alle hier verstanden. Und das zeigt das, weil wir heute so viele sind. Und ich freue mich wirklich, wirklich, wirklich von ganzem Herzen, dass ihr alle hier seid. Dass wir
An dem Augenblick, wo wir denken, es ist eigentlich zu viel, wir können nicht mehr, wir wollen nicht mehr, müssen wir weitergehen. Das ist der Augenblick, wenn wir unsere Komfortzone verlassen. Und wir werden die Klimakrise nicht innerhalb unserer Komfortzone zurück und verstehen, wie wichtig es war, dass wir uns in diesem Augenblick geschworen haben, wir machen das. Komme, was wolle. Klimagerechtigkeit ist nicht nice to have. Es ist
Sagt ihr, sie muss von dem Bürgermeisterballon einfach geradeaus weiterlaufen. Von dem Bürgermeisterballon nicht mal mit dem 18 Jahre. Sag ich doch.
Luftschlösser und Realitätsfern nennen mich meine Eltern. Ich mache mir die Welt, wie ich sie brauche, sage ich. Und Pippi grinst hinter mir und pflückt sich eine Limonade vom Baum im Garten. Aber das sei die Wirtschaft und die Konzerne, die groß und meine Idee alleine zu wenig und nicht so richtig, um wirklich was zu verändern. Schwaches aus den Küchentönen und Momo hört zu und stellt sich neben mich. Unerschrocken gegen diese scheinbar übermächtige graue Masse, weil sie weiß, wie viel Macht eine gute Idee in der Gesellschaft hat. Ich habe Katniss Mut bewundert und ihr versprochen, mich gegen Ungerechtigkeit einzusetzen in einer Welt, in der Erwachsene Neiches tragen und hinter sich nähen. Was sie dazu zu sagen hätte, will ich gar nicht wissen. Wie hätte ich mit diesen Büchern, diesen Freundinnen aus Buchstaben nicht mehr hätten werden sollen? Auf Twitter schrieb jemand, es scheint fast, wenn wir in die Bücherregale versorgt werden, die keinen Hass auf mich schieben, weil meine Generation den Strom der Gesellschaft nicht ernst genommen hat. Auf den